A lone black woman stands between two armed police officers and an aging Hell's Angel in a nearly empty diner. Her hands shake, but her voice is steady as steel when she says, "You will not harass this man in my establishment." The officer's hand hovers near his weapon as tension crackles through the air. "You're making a mistake," he warns, leaning closer. "This town has a long memory for those who choose the wrong side." She doesn't back down, even as whispers spread like wildfire through her small town. What happens next will leave you speechless. Before I continue this incredible true story, let me know where you're watching from in the comments. I read every single one, and your stories of standing up against injustice inspire the content on this channel. Maya Washington's hands were cracked and dry from the harsh cleaning chemicals she used to scrub Washington's soul food diners spotless each morning. The breakfast rush, if you could even call 5 customers a rush these days, had ended, leaving behind the lingering scent of bacon grease and coffee grounds. The ancient ceiling fan creaked overhead, barely stirring the humid summer air that hung heavy throughout Pine Ridge. She paused, towel in hand, and gazed out the smudged windows at the half-deserted main street. 3 more storefronts had closed in the past month alone. The hardware store where her father used to buy his supplies. The florist where he would pick up yellow daisies for her mother's birthday, even years after she'd passed. The barbershop where men gathered to debate politics and sports with equal fervor. All gone now, windows papered over with for lease signs that had faded from white to yellow to a defeated gray. Maya's eyes drifted to the cash register. She didn't need to count the meager bills inside. It wouldn't be enough. Not nearly enough for the stack of overdue notices tucked beneath the counter. The electricity bill with its angry red stamp. The mortgage statement with its thinly veiled threats. The hospital invoices that kept coming, each thicker than the last. And the prescription receipts. Those were the worst. Each one represented another week her father might have some relief from the pain that had become his constant companion since the stroke stole half his body's function and all of his independence. Just a few more months, Maya whispered to herself, tucking a tight coil of hair behind her ear. It was a promise she'd been making for 2 years now, ever since she'd left her nursing program at Emory University to come home and care for her father and the diner he'd built with his own 2 hands. A diner that was now the only black-owned business left in Pine Ridge. Have you ever stood alone for what you believe is right, even when everyone around you stepped back? Share your experience in the comments below. And if you value stories about everyday courage, hit that subscribe button and join our community of people who believe in the power of standing up for what's right. Maya's alarm blared at 4:30 a.m., though she was already awake. Sleep had become a luxury she could rarely afford, both financially and mentally. The weight of responsibility had a way of keeping eyelids from staying shut. She moved through her morning routine with practiced efficiency. Shower, dress, quick coffee, check on her father, Raymond, who slept in the converted dining room of their small house behind the diner. Adjust his blankets. Leave his medication and water within reach. Kiss his forehead gently. Leave a note reminding him she was just a phone call away. By 5:15, Maya was unlocking the back door of Washington's Soul Food. The routine never varied. Start the coffee. Prep the biscuit dough. Fire up the ancient grill that had seen better days, but still managed to turn out perfect hash browns. Turn on the open sign that flickered uncertainly, as if the neon itself wasn't sure the diner should still be operating. As she worked, her mind drifted back to her father's words. Words he'd repeated so often they had become part of her DNA. "Maya, baby," he would say, spatula moving in graceful arcs across the grill top. "In this diner, we don't see color, patches, or pocketbooks. Just people. Everyone deserves a warm meal and a moment of peace. Everyone's money spends the same at Washington's." Raymond Washington had opened the diner in 1983 when Pine Ridge still had a functioning paper mill and a downtown where shops didn't need metal grates over the windows at night. He'd faced his share of troubles as a black business owner in rural Georgia, but he'd persevered through sheer force of will and the quality of his food. Most days, Maya wondered if her will was as strong as his. She suspected it wasn't. By 6:30, the first customers trickled in. Mr. Patterson, a retired mill worker whose pension barely covered his basic needs. He always ordered the same thing: 1 egg over easy, 2 slices of toast, black coffee, and left the same tip, $1, meticulously smoothed and placed under his coffee cup. The Henderson sisters came next, elderly twins who shared everything, including a single breakfast plate. They never spoke above a whisper, but somehow managed to fill the space with warmth. By 8 a.m., the diner had seen perhaps a dozen customers. Not enough. Never enough. But Maya smiled and poured coffee and asked about grandchildren and aching joints as if the weight of financial ruin wasn't pressing down on her shoulders. At 2 p.m., during the afternoon lull, Maya flipped the sign to closed and drove the 10 minutes to Pine Ridge Medical Center. The sterile hospital corridors had become as familiar to her as the diner's kitchen. She navigated the maze of hallways on autopilot, nodding to nurses who knew her by name after so many visits. Room 318. Raymond Washington looked smaller each time she saw him there. Once a man who filled every room with his presence, he now seemed to disappear into the white hospital sheets. The stroke had ravaged the right side of his body and taken his speech, but his eyes, deep brown and alert, still radiated the strength that had carried him through decades of struggle. "Hey, Daddy," Maya said softly, settling into the chair beside his bed. Slow day at the diner again. She took his left hand, still strong, still warm, and held it between both of hers. "Mrs. Henderson asked about you. Said she's keeping you in her prayers." Maya forced brightness into her voice. "And Mr. Patterson brought in a newspaper clipping about that new treatment they're testing in Atlanta. I'll look into it when I get home tonight." Raymond's eyes met hers. He couldn't speak, but he saw everything. He saw the exhaustion etched into the corners of her eyes, the way her shoulders curved inward under invisible pressure, the brave face she put on that never quite reached her eyes anymore. He squeezed her hand weakly. Maya swallowed the lump in her throat. "The diner's fine, Daddy. Just a slow patch. It'll pick up." The lie tasted bitter on her tongue, but she delivered it with practiced ease. "You just focus on getting stronger." As she left the hospital an hour later, Maya thought about the unfinished nursing degree, the apartment in Atlanta she'd given up, the career that had been just beginning to take shape. She didn't regret coming home, not when her father needed her, but some days the weight of what might have been pressed down harder than others. The next morning crawled by with the same sluggish rhythm. Maya served eggs and grits and coffee to the handful of regulars. She wiped down already clean counters. She calculated and recalculated how many more weeks she could keep the lights on. The bell above the door jangled at 11:17 a.m. The sound pierced the quiet diner, and instantly, Maya felt the atmosphere change. Something prickled along her spine, a sixth sense her father had always said was inherited from her grandmother, who claimed to see storms coming days before the clouds gathered. Maya turned from the counter, coffee pot in hand, and understood immediately why the air had suddenly grown thick with tension. A man stood in the doorway, his massive frame nearly filling it completely. He wore a dusty black leather jacket despite the Georgia summer heat, the material cracked with age and use. His beard was salt and pepper, mostly salt, hanging down to his chest. His face was weathered, deep lines carved by sun and time. But it was the patch on his back that drew every eye in the diner. The Death's Head insignia of the Hells Angels Motorcycle Club. The few customers present reacted instantly. Mrs. Taylor, a church deacon's wife, clutched her pearls with a small, involuntary gasp. Old Mr. Henderson shifted in his booth, coffee cup frozen halfway to his lips. Even Maya's cook, Jerome, peered through the pass-through window, spatula suspended over the grill. The biker moved forward, boots heavy against the linoleum floor. Each step seemed to require effort, his shoulders hunched slightly, his gait uneven. He chose a stool at the far end of the counter, away from the other customers. Up close, Maya could see the exhaustion etched into his features, the redness rimming his eyes, the slight tremor in his large, calloused hands as he placed them on the countertop. Maya's father's words echoed in her mind. Everyone's money spends the same at Washington's. She wiped her palms on her apron, picked up a menu and a glass of water, and approached him with the same smile she offered every customer. "Welcome to Washington's," she said, voice steady despite the tension humming through the diner. "Today's special is smothered pork chops with collard greens and mac and cheese. Made the greens fresh this morning." The biker looked up, and Maya was struck by his eyes, pale blue, bloodshot, and carrying a weight she recognized immediately. It was the same weight she saw in her father's eyes. The weight of fighting a battle you're not sure you can win. "Coffee," he said, his voice gravel and rust. "Black, and whatever's quickest from the kitchen. Been on the road since dawn." As Maya poured his coffee, she noticed something that the others in the diner couldn't see from their vantage point. A hospital bracelet partially concealed by his leather jacket cuff. Her trained nursing eye caught the familiar format of a patient ID number. "Long right ahead of you?" she asked, setting the mug before him. He took a long sip before answering, wrapping both hands around the mug as if drawing warmth from it despite the summer heat. "Heading back to Pine Ridge Medical later," he said, voice dropping. "My daughter." His words faltered, fracturing like ice under too much weight. He cleared his throat and tried again. "My daughter's there. Treatment today." Maya didn't need him to finish. She'd seen that look too many times during her nursing rotations in oncology. The helpless rage of a parent who would take on their child's pain in a heartbeat if only they could. "I'll get you some eggs and biscuits," she said softly. 6 minutes, tops. As she turned to put in the order, Maya felt the stares from around the diner. Disapproving, suspicious, fearful. She knew exactly what this would cost her in a town where rumor traveled faster than light and judgment was the local currency. But she also knew what was right. And Maya Washington had never backed down from doing what was right. What small act of kindness have you received that changed your entire day? Drop your story in the comments below, and don't forget to subscribe to hear more stories about people who choose compassion over fear. Hit that notification bell to be the first to know when we post new content about everyday heroes like you. Back to our story. Maya had just placed a plate of steaming eggs and biscuits in front of the biker when the bell above the door jangled again. This time, the sound cut through the diner like a knife, sharp and warning. She didn't need to turn around to know who had entered. The sudden silence told her everything. The atmosphere shifted instantly, tension thickening like humid air before a thunderstorm. Mrs. Taylor hunched lower over her coffee cup. Mr. Henderson's newspaper crinkled as his grip tightened. The biker, who had just introduced himself as Victor Coleman, didn't look up from his food, but Maya noticed how his shoulders stiffened, how his weathered hands curled slightly, as if preparing for something inevitable. Officer Jackson Roberts and Deputy Tanya Williams stood in the entrance, both in full uniform. Their badges caught the sunlight streaming through the dusty blinds, small flashes of gold that seemed to announce their authority more effectively than words ever could. Officer Roberts moved first, crossing the worn linoleum with a swagger that came from 15 years of being Pine Ridge's self-appointed moral compass. His boots made a deliberate rhythm against the floor, thud, scuff, thud, as he approached the counter where Victor sat. Deputy Williams hung back by the door, her posture rigid, her eyes darting between Maya and Victor with an unreadable expression. Well, Roberts said, voice pitched to carry across the silent diner. "Don't often see your kind in Pine Ridge." Victor continued eating, methodically cutting his eggs into precise pieces. He didn't look up, but Maya could see the slight tremor that had returned to his hands. "Just having breakfast, officer," Victor said quietly, his voice low but respectful. Roberts positioned himself directly beside Victor's stool, an intentional invasion of space. He leaned one elbow on the counter, tilting his head to get a better look at the patch on Victor's jacket. "Death's head," Roberts said, tapping the insignia with 2 fingers. "You know what that means to folks around here, don't you, Maya?" Maya felt heat rising to her cheeks. "It means he's a customer in my diner, Officer Roberts. Same as anyone else who walks through that door." Roberts chuckled, the sound devoid of any actual humor. "Same? That's rich. He turned his attention fully to Victor now. Maybe we should run your ID, friend. Make sure you're not one of those angels we got bulletins about last week. The ones moving product through the county. Victor set down his fork with deliberate care. He reached slowly, telegraphing every movement, toward the inside pocket of his jacket. Robert's hand dropped immediately to the holster at his hip. Easy there, Robert said, voice suddenly hard. Maya stepped forward without thinking, placing herself between Roberts and Victor. He's just getting his wallet. Jackson, you asked for ID, didn't you? The use of his first name, a deliberate reminder that they'd known each other since high school, seemed to irritate Roberts further. His eyes narrowed. Step back, Maya. You don't know what you're dealing with. I know exactly what I'm dealing with, Maya said, her voice steadier than she felt. I'm dealing with a paying customer having breakfast before visiting his sick daughter at the hospital. A flicker of surprise crossed Robert's face, but he recovered quickly. And you believe that? From someone wearing the colors of a known criminal organization. Victor had his wallet out now, ID visible. My daughter's in room 237. Jasmine Coleman. Stage for lymphoma. You're welcome to check. Roberts ignored him, focusing instead on Maya. You're making a mistake, Maya, he said, voice dropping to a warning murmur. This town has a long memory for folks who choose the wrong side. The threat hung in the air between them, unspoken but clear as day. Pine Ridge was a town where reputations were currency, where being ostracized could mean the slow death of a business that was already struggling. Maya felt something snap inside her, like a dam breaking after years of pressure. All the compromises, all the silent nods to people who looked at her father's diner as a curiosity rather than a cornerstone of the community, all the time she'd swallowed her words when Roberts and his friends made comments about those people from Atlanta moving into the county. The wrong side, Maya repeated, her voice gaining strength with each word. The wrong side of what exactly? Treating someone with basic human dignity? Is that the line I'm not supposed to cross? Roberts straightened, visibly surprised by her defiance. His hand still rested casually on his holster, a posture Maya had seen him adopt countless times when dealing with people who looked like her. You know exactly what I mean, Roberts said, his tone suddenly thick with condescension. These people bring trouble, drugs, violence. You want that in your daddy's diner. What I want, Maya said, deliberately moving to stand fully between Roberts and Victor, is for you to stop harassing my customers based on what they're wearing. You have no probable cause, no reason to check his ID other than that patch. And we both know that's not legal. The last word hung in the air like a challenge. Maya's nursing courses had included a module on patients' rights and law enforcement interactions. She knew enough to recognize when someone's civil liberties were being violated, and enough to know Roberts was counting on nobody calling him out. Deputy Williams finally spoke up from her position near the door. Jackson, she said quietly, we should get back on patrol. Roberts ignored her, leaning in closer to Maya. She could smell the peppermint gum he always chewed, could see the small scar above his right eyebrow from a high school football injury. You're choosing a real interesting hill to die on, Maya Washington, he said softly. His hand moved from his holster to her shoulder, applying just enough pressure to try to move her aside, a small but deliberate show of physical dominance. Maya didn't budge. Take your hand off me, she said, each word precise and clear. Now, the diner had gone so quiet that the tick of the ancient wall clocks sounded like hammers on anvils. Every eye was fixed on the tableau at the counter, a black woman standing firm against a white officer, defending a Hell's Angel. In Pine Ridge, Georgia, this wasn't just unusual. It was revolutionary. Robert's face flushed red, but he removed his hand. Something dangerous flashed across his features before settling into a tight smile. You'll regret this, he said simply. Victor stood up slowly, reaching for his wallet. I don't want any trouble, he said. I'll just pay and go. Maya turned slightly, keeping Roberts in her peripheral vision. Your money's no good here today, she said firmly. Breakfast is on the house. Victor looked at her with something approaching wonder in his tired eyes. Roberts made a disgusted sound in the back of his throat. Let's go. Tanya, he barked, turning on his heel. Deputy Williams hesitated a moment longer, her eyes meeting Maya's briefly. Something passed between them. Not quite solidarity, but acknowledgement. Then she followed Roberts out the door. The bell jangled discordantly as the door swung shut behind them. The silence that followed was complete, heavy with the weight of what had just transpired. Maya became acutely aware of her racing heart, the tremor in her hands, the sheen of sweat that had formed across her forehead. Victor sat back down slowly. "You shouldn't have done that," he said quietly. Maya busied herself wiping down the already clean counter. "Probably not," she agreed. "Thank you," he said, the words rough with emotion. "Most people, they see the jacket and that's it. They don't see the person wearing it." Maya gave him a small smile. "My father always said judge by actions, not appearances." She nodded toward his hospital bracelet. "How's your daughter doing?" Pain flashed across Victor's weathered face. "Not good. Experimental treatment. Last option we got." Maya nodded, understanding the weight of those words better than most. "I hope it works," she said simply. Victor finished his breakfast in silence, then stood to leave despite Maya's insistence that the meal was free. He tucked a $20 bill under his plate anyway. "Name's Victor Coleman," he said, extending a hand. "Maya Washington," she replied, taking it. His grip was firm but gentle. "Safe travels, Mr. Coleman." Victor nodded once, a solemn gesture full of unspoken gratitude, and walked out into the bright midday sun. The moment he was gone, the whispers started. Maya could feel the stares burning into her back as she cleared Victor's plate. Mrs. Taylor gathered her purse with a sniff and left without finishing her tea. Mr. Henderson buried his face deeper in his newspaper. Even Jerome was unusually quiet in the kitchen. By closing time, the air in Washington's soul food felt stifling with unspoken judgment. Maya flipped the sign to closed with a heaviness that had nothing to do with physical exhaustion. She'd made a choice today, the right choice, but she had no illusions about the consequences that would follow. As she locked up, Maya noticed something taped to the front door that hadn't been there earlier. A piece of cardboard with crude red letters scrawled across it. "No biker lovers. No cop haters." Her stomach twisted as she ripped it down, crumpling it in her fist. The message burned itself into her memory all the same. This was only the beginning. Would you have the courage to stand up for a stranger when it could cost you everything? Let me know in the comments below, and don't forget to hit that subscribe button and notification bell. This channel is dedicated to stories of everyday courage and kindness that change lives. Join our community of people who believe in standing up for what's right. The fluorescent lights of Pine Ridge Medical Center buzzed overhead as Maya made her way through the quiet corridors that evening. It was well past visiting hours, but the night nurse, Beverly, had known Maya since kindergarten and always looked the other way. 10 minutes, Beverly warned as Maya passed the nurse's station. "Dr. Levine's on duty tonight, and he's strict about the rules." Maya nodded gratefully and slipped into room 318. Her father was awake, his eyes finding her immediately in the dim light. He couldn't speak, but his expression asked the questions his voice couldn't form. "Hey, Daddy," Maya said softly, settling into the chair beside his bed. She took his good hand in both of hers, drawing comfort from its familiar warmth. "Interesting day at the diner," she began, attempting a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. I might have gotten on Jackson Roberts' bad side." Raymond's eyebrow raised slightly, encouraging her to continue. "There was this man, a Hell's Angel, if you can believe it. Big guy, leather jacket, the whole deal. But he wasn't causing any trouble. He was just having breakfast before visiting his daughter. She's got cancer, Daddy. He was just a father worried about his little girl." Maya's voice caught, and she paused to collect herself. Jackson and Deputy Williams came in and started harassing him for no reason other than his jacket. And I couldn't stand by and watch it. I remembered what you always told me about judging people by their actions, not their appearance. A tear slipped down her cheek, and she wiped it away quickly. "I stood up to him, Daddy. I got between them when Jackson put his hand on his gun. I told him he couldn't treat customers like that in our diner." Raymond's eyes shone with emotion. His fingers tightened around hers, a feeble squeeze, but one filled with meaning. Pride. I know it was stupid, Maya continued, her voice steadier now. Jackson's got half the town in his pocket, and we can't afford to lose any more customers. But I kept thinking about how it would feel if someone treated you that way, or me, just because of how we look. Raymond's eyes closed briefly, a look of profound understanding crossing his features. When they opened again, they held something Maya needed desperately: approval. Someone left a nasty note on the door after closing, she admitted. I don't think it's going to blow over. But I couldn't have done anything differently, Daddy. I just couldn't. They sat in silence for a long moment. The only sounds the soft beep of the heart monitor and the distant squeak of rubber-soled shoes in the corridor outside. Finally, Maya leaned forward and pressed a kiss to her father's forehead. I'll figure it out, she promised. Washington's soul food isn't going anywhere. We're tougher than they think. As she left the hospital, Maya wondered if that was a promise she could keep. But she walked with her head higher than when she'd arrived, bolstered by the silent approval in her father's eyes. The next morning, Maya arrived at the diner at her usual time, 5:15 a.m. The pre-dawn air was heavy with humidity, promising another scorching Georgia summer day. She unlocked the back door, flipped on the lights, and started her routine with mechanical precision, trying to ignore the knot of dread in her stomach. By 8 a.m., the truth she'd been fearing became impossible to deny. No one came. The morning rush, normally a modest but reliable stream of customers, never materialized. The booths remained empty. The coffee grew cold in the pot. The biscuits Maya had made fresh at 5:30 sat untouched beneath their warming cloth. By 10 a.m., Maya had wiped every surface in the diner twice. She'd reorganized the condiment station, refilled salt and pepper shakers that were already full, and checked the bathroom paper towel dispenser so many times that even she had to acknowledge she was just keeping busy to stave off panic. By noon, the silence had become unbearable. Washington's soul food had never been this empty. Not even on Christmas Day when they opened for 3 hours to serve free meals to anyone who needed one. At 12:37 p.m., the bell above the door finally jingled. Maya's heart leapt, then immediately sank as she saw who had entered. Not a customer. A delivery man with the electric company's logo on his shirt and a disconnect notice in his hand. Sorry, Maya, he said, genuinely apologetic as he handed her the paper. Boss says I gotta give this to you directly. You've got 3 days. Maya took the notice with numb fingers, thanked him mechanically, and watched him leave. The number at the bottom of the page swam before her eyes. More than she had in the diner's account. More than she could scrape together even if she sold her mother's wedding ring and her own car. This was it. The beginning of the end for Washington's soul food. Maya sank onto a stool at the counter. The disconnect notice crumpled in her fist, and for the first time since her father's stroke, she allowed herself a moment of pure despair. The bell above the door jangled again. Maya looked up, hastily wiping away tears, expecting to see another bill collector or perhaps Officer Roberts coming to gloat. Instead, a couple stood in the entrance. The man was tall and lean, with salt and pepper hair pulled back in a neat ponytail. He wore faded jeans and a leather vest that bore the same death's head insignia as Victor's jacket, though smaller and more weathered. The woman beside him was petite but sturdy-looking, with silver-streaked dark hair braided down her back and the same emblem on her denim vest. Maya Washington? The man asked, his voice gentle despite his intimidating appearance. Maya nodded, rising from the stool. Can I help you? The couple approached, and the man extended his hand. I'm Samuel Coleman. This is my wife, Layla. We're Victor's brother and sister-in-law. Maya shook their hands, surprise momentarily displacing her despair. Is Victor okay? His daughter. Layla smiled, the expression warming her weathered face. Jasmine had a rough night after yesterday's treatment, but she's stable now. Victor's with her. She glanced around the empty diner. He told us what happened here yesterday. What you did for him. Maya shrugged, uncomfortable with the gratitude in their eyes. I didn't do anything special. Just what any decent person would do. Samuel shook his head. In our experience, decent people are a lot rarer than you might think. Especially when it comes to dealing with people who look like us. He gestured to his vest. "Can I offer you some coffee?" Maya asked, falling back on hospitality as a refuge from emotion. They accepted, and Maya poured 3 cups, thankful to have something to do with her hands. The 3 of them sat at the counter, the enormous emptiness of the diner emphasizing the significance of their presence. "Victor said you stood between him and that cop," Samuel said after taking a sip of coffee. "Said you didn't back down even when the officer put his hand on his weapon." Maya stared into her coffee cup. "Officer Roberts likes to intimidate people. He's been doing it since high school. And now he's turned the town against you," Layla observed quietly, glancing at the empty diner. Maya couldn't deny it. People in Pine Ridge, they choose sides. And they chose his. Samuel and Layla exchanged a look that contained an entire conversation. Finally, Samuel set his cup down with a decisive click. "We wanted to thank you properly," he said. "Not with money," he added quickly, seeing Maya's expression. "With support." Maya tilted her head, confusion creasing her brow. "Support?" Samuel smiled, the expression transforming his stern features. "In our world, loyalty means everything. When someone stands up for one of us, especially someone with nothing to gain and everything to lose, we remember that." "I don't understand," Maya said slowly. Layla reached across the counter and took Maya's hand in her own. Her palm was calloused but warm. "Just wait," she said, her eyes twinkling with a secret. "You will. Have you ever received unexpected help when you needed it most? Share your story in the comments below. And if you believe in the power of standing together against injustice, hit that subscribe button and notification bell. Join our community of people who know that sometimes the most powerful thing we can do is simply stand up for each other." Maya was about to ask Samuel and Layla what they meant when she heard it, a low rumble in the distance, like thunder on a clear day. She tilted her head, confused, and saw the couple exchange knowing smiles. "Come outside," Samuel said, standing. Maya followed them to the front door, the rumble growing louder with each step. When she pushed open the door and stepped onto the sidewalk, her breath caught in her throat. Down both ends of Main Street, as far as she could see, motorcycles were approaching. Not just a few, dozens, then scores, then what had to be hundreds. They roared toward Washington's soul food in a coordinated wave of chrome and leather, a moving river of metal and humanity that seemed to consume the entire street. "What is this?" Maya whispered, her voice lost in the growing thunder of engines. Layla squeezed her arm gently. "This is what happens when you show kindness to one of our own." The first riders reached the diner and began to pull over, lining their bikes with military precision along both sides of the street. Maya watched, stunned, as they dismounted. Men and women of all ages, some gray-haired and weathered, others barely out of their 20s. All of them wore some version of the death's head insignia, on vests, jackets, or patches. They filled the sidewalk, nodding respectfully to Maya as they approached. Some carried small bags or containers. Others simply extended hands in greeting, introducing themselves with names Maya knew she would never remember in her state of shock. Phoenix Chapter, Macon Riders, Atlanta East Side, Augusta Crew. The bell above the diner door jangled continuously as they filed inside, filling booths, taking stools at the counter, standing along walls when seating ran out. Maya remained frozen on the sidewalk, watching as the impossible unfolded before her eyes. Across the street, Pine Ridge residents began to gather. They stared from shop doorways, peered from windows, whispered behind hands. Maya could see the confusion on their faces, the disbelief, and in some cases, the fear. A massive motorcycle pulled up directly in front of where Maya stood. Its rider was a mountain of a man, broad-shouldered and solid, with a neatly trimmed white beard and piercing hazel eyes. His leather vest bore more patches than any Maya had seen so far, including one that read President above the Death's Head insignia and Dominic Blackwood, Southern Georgia Chapter. He dismounted with surprising grace for his size and approached Maya, removing his gloves and extending a massive hand. "You must be Maya Washington," he said, his voice a deep rumble that matched his appearance. "I'm Dom Blackwood." Maya shook his hand, finding her voice at last. What is happening? She asked, gesturing at the sea of motorcycles that now lined Main Street as far as she could see. Dom smiled, the expression warming his stern features. Victor called his chapter about what happened yesterday. They called their brothers and sisters. Word travels fast in our family. But why? Maya asked, still unable to comprehend the scale of what was happening. Dom's expression grew serious. In our world, loyalty is everything. When someone does right by one of us, especially someone who has nothing to gain and everything to lose, we don't forget it. He gestured to the crowded diner. These people came to say thank you, but also to send a message. A message? Maya echoed. That you're not alone, Dom said simply. That anyone who has a problem with you now has a problem with all of us. Maya looked past him to the still arriving motorcycles, tears welling in her eyes. There must be 200 people here. 237 at last count, Dom confirmed with a small grin. And every one of them is hungry. Maya's hand flew to her mouth. I don't have nearly enough food for. Taken care of, Samuel cut in, appearing at Dom's side. Supply trucks are on their way. Should be here in about 20 minutes. All paid for. By who? Maya asked, dazed. By us, Dom said, as if it were the most natural thing in the world. Consider it an investment in someone who saw beyond a patch to the human being beneath it. Inside the diner, someone had started playing music from a portable speaker. The sounds of laughter and conversation spilled onto the sidewalk, a stark contrast to the deathly silence of just an hour before. I don't know what to say, Maya managed, her voice thick with emotion. Dom placed a gentle hand on her shoulder. You don't have to say anything. Just keep making that coffee of yours. Word is it's the best in 3 counties. True to Samuel's word, delivery trucks began arriving within the half hour. Crates of fresh eggs, loaves of bread, cases of bacon and sausage, gallons of milk and orange juice. Enough to feed an army. A group of bikers unloaded everything without being asked, forming a chain to move supplies from the trucks to the diner's small storage room. Maya called Jerome at home, her voice breathless with excitement and disbelief. I need you at the diner, she said. Now. And bring anyone else who can cook. By mid-afternoon, Washington's soul food was operating at a capacity it hadn't seen in years. Jerome had brought his wife and teenage son, both of whom pitched in without question. 3 female bikers with previous kitchen experience had donned spare aprons and taken over the grill alongside him. Maya moved in a blur between tables, pouring coffee, taking orders, delivering plates piled high with food. The most remarkable thing, however, was happening at the tables themselves. As word spread through Pine Ridge about the spectacle at Washington's, curiosity began to overcome fear and prejudice. A few brave locals ventured inside. First Maya's old high school chemistry teacher, then the pharmacist who filled her father's prescriptions, then others. They came cautiously at first, eyes wide at the sea of leather and tattoos. But empty chairs were pulled out in welcome, conversations were started, and slowly, hesitantly, barriers began to crumble. Mrs. Henderson, one of the elderly twins who had been coming to Washington's for decades, sat in a booth deep in conversation with a woman whose arms were completely covered in colorful tattoos. They discovered they both had granddaughters named Emma and were exchanging photos from their wallets. Mr. Patterson, the retired mill worker, was teaching a group of young riders how to play checkers with the ancient set kept in the diner's back corner, his face alight with a joy Maya hadn't seen in years. The mayor himself had slipped in through the back door, claiming he just wanted to assess the situation, but was now sitting at the counter between a gray-haired biker named Dutch and a woman who introduced herself as the road captain of the Atlanta chapter. The bell above the door jingled again, and Maya looked up to see Victor Coleman standing in the entrance. He looked exhausted, but was smiling as he surveyed the packed diner. His eyes found Maya's across the crowded room, and she made her way to him, weaving between tables. Victor, she said, genuinely pleased to see him. How's Jasmine? A flash of emotion crossed his weathered face. That's why I came to find you. The doctors just did a scan after yesterday's treatment. His voice caught. It's working, Maya. The tumor's shrinking. For the first time in months, They're using the word hopeful. Maya's hand flew to her mouth, tears springing to her eyes. Without thinking, she threw her arms around Victor in a fierce hug. He stiffened momentarily before returning the embrace, his large frame shaking slightly with emotion. When they separated, Victor wiped at his eyes with the back of his hand. "She wants to meet you," he said gruffly. "Says anyone who'd stand up to a cop for her old man must be someone worth knowing." Maya smiled through her tears. "I'd like that very much." The afternoon wore on, golden sunlight slanting through the diner's windows as the crowd showed no signs of thinning. Someone had set up a grill on the sidewalk outside, cooking burgers and hot dogs to supplement the diner's menu. The atmosphere was something between a community festival and a family reunion, loud, chaotic, and filled with a warmth that seemed to radiate from the very walls. At around 6 o'clock, Dom Blackwood raised his hand, and a hush fell over the crowd. He stood in the center of the diner, his imposing presence commanding attention without effort. "I want to say something," he began, his deep voice carrying easily through the room. "Yesterday, when others turned their backs, Maya Washington here stood tall. When others judged a man by his patch, she saw the father, the human being." He gestured to Victor, who stood near the counter, eyes downcast but posture proud. "In our world," Dom continued, "loyalty and respect aren't just words. They're everything." He turned to Maya, his expression solemn. "So, I want it known from this day forward that Washington's soul food rides under the protection of the Hells Angels." A cheer erupted, loud enough to rattle the ancient ceiling fan, boots stomping against the floor in thunderous approval. Maya stood frozen, overwhelmed by the tide of emotion washing over her. Dom raised his hand again, waiting for quiet. "And if anyone in this town has a problem with that," he added, his tone matter-of-fact rather than threatening, "they'll have a problem with all of us." His gaze swept the room, settling briefly on the mayor, who shifted uncomfortably but nodded in understanding. With the formalities concluded, the celebration resumed. Maya found herself pulled into conversations, introduced to countless writers, hugged by people whose names she couldn't keep straight but whose gratitude was unmistakable. As the evening deepened, Samuel approached her with a wrapped package. "From all of us," he said, handing it to her. Maya unwrapped it carefully. Inside was a custom leather vest, beautifully crafted. On the back, "Washington's Soul Food" was embroidered in bold letters, encircled by the words "Friend of the Angels." Below it, a smaller patch read simply, "Protected." "I don't know what to say," Maya whispered, running her fingers over the stitching. "You don't have to say anything," Samuel replied. "Just hang it somewhere people can see it." The bell above the door jangled once more. Maya looked up to see Officer Jackson Roberts standing awkwardly in the entrance, hat in hand. The diner fell silent, tension crackling through the air like electricity. Dom Blackwood straightened, his massive frame seeming to grow even larger. Victor took a half-step forward. Every rider in the place seemed to shift imperceptibly, a united front of leather and solidarity. Roberts swallowed hard, his Adam's apple bobbing visibly. His eyes darted around the room before settling on Maya. "Could I get a cup of coffee?" he asked, his voice stripped of its usual arrogance. Maya studied him for a long moment. She could feel the weight of every eye in the diner on her, waiting to see what she would do. She thought of all the times Roberts had made her feel small, all the thinly veiled threats, the casual cruelty. Then she thought of her father's words. "Everyone deserves a warm meal and a moment of peace." "Have a seat," she said finally, nodding to an empty stool at the counter. Roberts made his way through the crowd, keeping his eyes fixed straight ahead as he navigated the sea of leather jackets. He sat gingerly, placing his hat on the counter beside him. Maya poured him a cup of coffee without comment. "Quite a turnout," Roberts said after a moment, his voice low. Maya didn't respond. She just continued wiping down the already clean counter. Roberts wrapped his hands around the mug, staring into the dark liquid as if it might offer some insight. "Town's changing," he muttered finally. Maya looked up, meeting his eyes directly. "Yes," she agreed. "It is." She left him there, sitting uncomfortably amidst the celebration, and returned to the people who had shown her what community truly meant. In the weeks that followed, Washington's soul food experienced a renaissance. The Hells Angels became regular fixtures, with at least a few bikes parked outside on any given day. Their presence, far from scaring customers away, seemed to have the opposite effect. People came from neighboring counties just to see the diner that had earned the protection of the notorious motorcycle club. Maya used the unexpected windfall to catch up on bills, make long overdue repairs, and finally install the new kitchen equipment Jerome had been requesting for years. She paid off her father's outstanding medical bills and began researching experimental treatments that might help his recovery. Every Sunday, a group of riders would escort her to the hospital to visit Raymond. They would wait patiently in the lobby, a living honor guard that raised eyebrows but was treated with cautious respect by the staff. Victor's daughter Jasmine began to show improvement. Maya visited her regularly, bringing homemade soup and stories about the diner. The teenage girl was shy at first, but soon opened up, revealing a sharp wit and resilience that reminded Maya of herself at that age. Officer Roberts kept a lower profile around town. There were rumors that the mayor had had a serious conversation with him about community policing standards. Deputy Williams stopped by the diner occasionally, now in civilian clothes, and developed a cautious friendship with Maya based on mutual respect. 1 month after the bikers had first filled Washington's soul food, Maya stood behind the counter during the afternoon lull, surveying her domain with quiet satisfaction. The diner hummed with life, a mix of locals and riders sharing tables as if it had always been this way. Her gaze fell on the leather vest hanging proudly on the wall beside her father's faded photograph. In that moment, Maya realized that the diner had become what her father had always envisioned, not just a place to eat, but a true community gathering spot where people were judged by their actions, not their appearances. The bell above the door jangled, and Maya looked up with a smile, ready to welcome whoever entered Washington's soul food, the diner where everyone, regardless of the patches they wore or the color of their skin, could find a hot meal, a warm welcome, and a moment of peace. This story reminds us of our shared humanity. If this touched your heart, please subscribe, turn on notifications, and share it with someone who needs to be reminded that standing up for what's right is always worth it, even when you stand alone. Where have you witnessed unexpected kindness in your life? Share your stories below. I read every comment, and your experiences inspire future videos on this channel. Thank you for watching. See you in the next video.